Well, a few things that I'd like to address. First of all, is that we recently are currently, in fact, having exams. I am delighted to see that many of you participated in these exams. Whether you perform well or not, that is not really the key. The key is that you participate and you study really diligently. And I'm delighted to see that. You don't have to grasp onto the grades you get after the marks. Don't grasp onto the numbers. They're not life-threatening. Another thing I'd like to make the announcement is that we are currently we notice that there are the group of people, for example, they don't engage in studying diligently, they don't even serve the Sangha, and they're not really doing anything meaningful over here. And for this group of people, I really think that it is the best for them not to stay here. Maybe they have other sacred meanings, for example, propagating the Dharma teachings elsewhere, or even attend Rainbow Body in this life, but we can't see their sacred meanings. But if their actions are like such, they has to be expelled. And this is the new regulation that's made over here. The lamas and jomos from the Tibetan side, that is the Sangha from the Tibetan sector, they implement this regulation as well. And over here, we're going to implement this regulation too. The regulations are made throughout the years of experience. It is not just out of some impulsive decisions within our management team at all. Our regulations over here, in fact, it is required that people or the students staying here, they have to complete the 5 treatises studies and pass all the exams. Well, I do think you need to look into the practical aspect of implementing these rules. If the majority of people won't be able to meet these kinds of requirements, and I think it might be because of the rules are probably a little bit too strict. There are people, for example, they don't have the capacity naturally because of their past karmic retributions or so on and so forth. Maybe they don't have good memories at all. Then in that case, they have to, I think it's very difficult for them to pass. Then there must be some other things that we have to think about. But I think majority of people nowadays are not doing well in terms of their studying and contemplation. It's because of the distractions in this day and age, because of the cell phones and computers and information. However, I do think the rules that we've made are very practical, and it should be easy for the practitioners to continue to stay here. For those of you who, for example, are not good at studying, then at least you can attend the classes that's more focused on practice. And those of you who can't engage in study nor practice, then it is not going to be very easy for you to be granted the opportunity to stay here. There are some of our fellow Sangha members are very much senior in their age. Then it's probably difficult for them to continue to stay here, and we have to also try to provide other opportunities and other options for them. For example, there are different places where they can go and where they can stay. I understand there are some of you who don't have the favorable conditions to stay here. Then you don't have to try your best to grasp onto the opportunities or any opportunities to stay here. I think it would be the best for you to part from here and go to places that would be more conducive into your study and practices.
那个领导他自己的思维都是这样的，但是我也不敢说什么。我说是的，领导。
The other day, I was told by one of the authorities whom manage over whom conduct certain kinds of management roles over here, and he mentioned that there are people spreading the rumor that CERTA is permanently under lockdown and it's never going to reopen again. And then that authority told me that this is really creating more difficulties for him. This is the way he thinks, but I didn't really say anything else. I only said, "Oh yeah, I agree with you." Anyhow, I really want to bring it into your attention that we are currently doing lots of management work, and it does take a lot of effort. There are practitioners staying here. If you don't engage in your own diligent study and practice and do not serve the Sangha, if you don't engage in any of those aspects, then I think it is the best for you not to stay here, because even the protectors won't protect you to stay here either, and you're using the resources of the others. And for practitioners whom, for example, really enjoys getting persuading the other people to, for example, organize various activities to travel to different places to receive precepts or receive empowerments and so on and so forth. Nowadays, we have this new rule implemented that whomsoever organize such events to organize or group the practitioners to travel to other monasteries or elsewhere to receive various Dharma transmissions and empowerments and even precepts is not allowed. This kind of personal activity is not allowed to be held over here, because this is the institute and we have our rules. Your organization of such trips and activities may influence other people's study and contemplation. So as an institute, we do not allow such activities, such organizations at all, and whomesoever organize such activities will receive consequences. There are people whom, for example, arrange all kinds of activities of paying pilgrimage visits and tours to Mount Wutai, to India, to the various places, the Potala, and so on and so forth. If you do it elsewhere, I had never stopped you. However, if you're here in Larungar, then it is not appropriate for you to make such organizations and take your disciples and your students to elsewhere to take pilgrimage tours and so on and so forth. Even the Dharma teachers over here, you're not allowed to do that, because you can't take the responsibility of any potential accidents. Back in 2017, I took very few number of Khenpos and Khemos to Mount Wutai, but I had never took anyone else to pay homage or to take those pilgrimage tours. We are a Buddhist institute, and our regulation, our practitioners over here, the students should should behave as such that you are studying in a Buddhist institute. This is not a tour company. I'm not saying that going on pilgrimage tours and paying, for example, paying visits to the great venerable masters or receiving empowerments are not meritorious. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that these are not the activities that is suitable to be held or to be organized from the level of a Buddhist institute, where an institution, a school, that we need to engage in studies and contemplation and practice. On top of that, there are some practitioners whom do not belong to any department, do not belong to any of our classes. They're not registered under any of our departments or classes at all, and they're just transferring back and forth, taking opportunities and staying in various bardals. So those people, if you're staying here, then I strongly encourage you to sign up to the classes. Some of the lay practitioners, in fact, we don't have anything else. The lay practitioners whom came here to receive empowerments and so on, then this is a time for you to go back. We don't have any other activities now. Otherwise, the lay practitioners, especially the female practitioners, if you take, for example, fresh flowers and cakes and so on to the male practitioners' residence area, it is not appropriate. I'm not sure what your purpose of trip is. Maybe to make offering to the Dharma Palace. I have no idea, but it is not allowed. It is not in accordance with our regulation. There are practitioners whom engage in the practice very diligently and really cherish the time, and that kind of activity is cherished and valued. Now let's begin our class. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons, and all see it, hear, receive it, and uphold it, about to fathom the direct of the true meaning, to liberate all beings, less generous, supreme Buddhishira.
탁바마리 니브르 접된 타당 위면의 제친 남카스타와 캡 상제 뉴트의 용던점마 메트르 셈신 근라 캡밋 나우즈니 뇨모 시시 진기 자와 상제 남지 특제 농거 남브럭토르 강직 근거 들어와이 샤강 강더 근거 체 대일 남토 께밋 께밋의 시르 타바르덕더 흔지 저 타바르덕더 흔지 저 더시 감나 강직기 어더시 감나 강직기 어더위 탑만 강직기 어더시 샤와 강더너 강체 여당 티테 딱 강체 여당 티테 딱 님진 때 여돈바당 뎀제와의 용전당 뎀집 대추 긴라너 넘버 또바 메쇼로 니브름 점바 삽줄 때 손이 당너 대여 뎀집 상점 초고연대 상집 셈진 상집 셈진 용선전 대지번 타이 뇽몽당 니위 뇽몽 왁착소 디근 떠너 덴존비 찐너 특제 첨보연 내직 보는 더더는 고름 지진 염소당 니마당은 남각대를真当龙人西边下西去用的人行当但是上的讲说呢深圳他们这年就是从你当的人你嘛人家起人他当外面的是上级南给看不见喏杨德做上去你是深圳看那得当着罗尔贴当马这不是대 이뇨모 전속 전 덴토르가나 년내 실 특지 몹즈도 롱당자 현지 원거 임정도 더던 셈진 총식당 잡아 용수 마조부 코라 저점 전문 차더 今天我们
Now let us begin our class
第三章法论的这个
on the Uttaratantra Shastra. Let's continue the class on the commentary where it discusses further about the third turning of the Dharma wheel. This Uttaratantra Shastra, we've already studied the first 3 chapters that included, for example, the teachings on the element. Everyone has Buddha nature. And then we learned about enlightenment, the Bodhi, the fruition, in terms of the 3 kayas. And now, how about the kayas, the various kayas qualities? Then we studied the various qualities of the 32 qualities that is associated with the Dharmakaya, and then 32 qualities that's associated with the Nirmanakaya. So after all of those qualities, let's look at the activities. Now we're going to look at the chapter 4, that is the 7th Vajra point, that is the activity. So over here we're talking about the uninterrupted aspect and the spontaneous aspect of activity. So today we're going to finish this parts talking about the general aspect of this. First of all, the activity is the action of realization, and it has 2 aspects, the concise teaching and then the explicit teaching. Usually, whenever we study the concise teaching, they're of one single statement, but over here it talks about the 2 aspects. One is spontaneous activity and spontaneous aspect of the activity, and the other one is the uninterrupted aspect of the creativity of the activity. So let's look at the concise explanation.
这个佛陀的话呢，就是他的这个事业啊，就是他的事业的话呢，不像我们这个众生。
The Buddha's activity is unlike the activity of the ordinary beings like us. For example, the ordinary beings, we have this mind of striving, and we would try our best to benefit sentient beings. We have this sense of effort, actually a lot of effort. And even with those efforts, sometimes we will be successful and sometimes we can't be successful. After putting into lots of effort, people would also feel successful or happy because they succeeded in their activity or with their effort, or feel rather quite disheartened once their activity is not fulfilled. However, the Buddha's activity is spontaneous and without effort. His activity is effortless and natural, just like how the automobiles that we have, the mechanical objects that we have nowadays, everything runs automatically. And similarly, the Buddha uninterruptedly, at the same time, spontaneously and effortlessly benefit the sentient beings. Unlike how some people would feel that how could someone could benefit sentient beings effortlessly. some religions may propose the idea that there is a creator, and the creator is constantly helping the others and constantly striving to help the sentient beings. Other than that, in fact, the Buddha benefits the sentient beings in an effortless way. Out of his great compassion and spontaneous, skillful means, the Buddha doesn't have any grasping towards the sentient beings, nor the effort. The first verse where it says that an all-embracing one always has spontaneous access to the disciples' temperaments. The means of training, the various training that suits their temperaments, and to seek them wherever they are at the right time. The Buddha knows all the temperaments, all of their interests and their preference, as well as their wishes and thoughts and disposition, latent tendencies, and so on and so forth. In fact, the Buddha is fully aware of all of that. But does the Buddha then have any ideation or dualistic differentiation about those capacities of sentient beings then? No, not at all. In fact, the Buddha doesn't have any of those differentiations about the sentient beings. So to the sentient beings, the sentient beings of the different disposition, latent tendencies and their wishes and thoughts and so on, the Buddha is well aware of all of them. And the Buddha would use various ways, very skillful means to tame them accordingly. Sometimes the Buddha would use the Sutrayana teachings to tame them, sometimes Tantrayana, sometimes with wrathful manifestation, sometimes peaceful. So various skillful means. I believe it is according to, I can't remember which text it is from, but it states that the Buddha's mind stream is devoid of desire. However, to manifest in front of the ones who have desire, the Buddha would then manifest as if he has desire. Though the nature of the Buddha does not have any, even a single strand of tint of desire. However, he would manifest to have desire so that he could tame the ones who have the defilements of desire. In front of the sentient beings of the various kinds of temperaments, the Buddha has the ability of placing them onto the path that would lead to higher rebirth, and the Buddha also would lead the sentient beings to the path of complete liberation. To the various different beings, the Buddha would carry out various activities to tame them without any grasping nor dichotomy. That's the third aspect. And the fourth aspect is that the Buddha is fully aware of where the sentient beings abide in terms of their environment. For example, the Buddha would go to Rajgir and sometimes Vishari and the different countries and different kingdoms. The Buddha would travel about and then liberate sentient beings accordingly. So he knows where the sentient beings are located whenever their temperaments or whenever their mind is matured to be liberated, and the Buddha would then liberate them accordingly at the different environment, also at the appropriate times. Sometimes for us, we as the ordinary beings, whenever we try to benefit the sentient beings, we don't encounter them at the right place, and sometimes we don't encounter them at the right time, right? But the Buddha knows all of them, and the Buddha knows all the 5 aspects, the disposition of the beings that he can tame, and then the latent tendencies and their wishes and thoughts and their capacities. All of those activities are carried out with the spontaneous effortlessness of the victorious one. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that just as how the sun and the moon would shine from the space, would move about in space, and would illuminate all phenomena without differentiation. There's no differentiation from the sun or moon. They don't illuminate up on plants or people with a sense of differentiation at all, right? Similarly, the Buddha, in fact, spontaneously roams about in Dharmata and teaches the sentient beings and tames the sentient beings, leads the sentient beings to liberation without effort and without dualism, a sense of any dichotomy. Of course, we can't help the sentient beings like the Buddha, but I think we can learn and try to develop awareness of different sentient beings' disposition and their wishes and their interests. I remember that I taught on this story when I was teaching the classics of one of the Chinese classics of teaching the students how to behave. There's a story of Confucius. Once Confucius was offered a cup of tea by Gong Shihua, and when he was offering tea to Confucius, the disciple of Confucius, Zilu asked Confucius, saying that, "Teacher, when I've just heard of a correct teaching and a suggestion from someone on the road I encountered. Should I carry out that action right away and listen to the suggestion?" Confucius told him, saying that, "Well, don't you think it's good for you to ask for example, your parents and teacher first, and then you can carry out that suggestion? Wouldn't that be more appropriate?" Then Zilu agreed, and he left. And then another disciple of Confucius entered the room quietly after Zilu had left. Ranyu asked the question, saying that, "Well, Venerable Teacher, I have a question. I just heard a good suggestion from someone, and after contemplation, I'm not sure still if I should carry out my action according to that suggestion." Confucius then stated to Ranyu, saying that, "I think you should carry out the action right away." Well, the person was offering tea to Confucius got really confused. In fact, and he asked, "It is the same question asked by 2 disciples, then why do you give 2 different advice?" Confucius then stated that, in fact, Zilu's temperament is very impulsive and he's very competitive. He tends to carry out actions too hastily. Therefore, I suggested him to ask for more suggestions from his parents and from the other teachers, so that he would contemplate more. However, my disciple Ranyu has rather temperament of being very indecisive because of his humble temperament. Therefore, I suggested him to carry out the action right away once he thinks that it is beneficial and it is good. The Buddha then is The Buddha, in fact, teaches in the way that is similar to Confucius, but more superior than Confucius, because the Buddha is omniscient. Of course, those of you who study Confucianism, you don't have to all of a sudden saying that, oh, I would stop following Confucius, I would start following the Buddha then. I don't think it's necessary for you to change your religion right away out of impulse. Look at all the teachings that's taught in the Mahayana teachings and look at the teachings in the Hinayana, and after the thorough studying, after the thorough investigation, I think those are the prerequisites for you to make a decision upon your faith and your spiritual path. Anyhow, over here it says that the Buddha, this is the Buddha's activity of benefiting sentient beings. It is spontaneous, and also his activity is effortless and with great skillful means that is according to the disciples' temperaments and disciples' various capacities as well. The next verse it says that it is the definitive accomplishment of all vehicles without exception. Enlightenment is vast without middle or end, and thus all pervasive like space. Fully seeing the Buddhahood, the treasure of unpolluted qualities present within all sentient beings without the slightest distinction. The wind of the Buddha's sublime compassion completely discipled the clouds of afflictions and the hindrance to knowledge which has spun their net about it. The numbering, the Chinese text is incorrect. You have to change it. So let's renumber it. Let's look at the first one. The first one over here says that, well, before I continue over here, I want to ask all of you to be very focused, because if you're distracted, then you won't be able to follow the train of thoughts. So you have to be very analytical and very much focused when you're attending this class, okay? The next, okay, over here, so it says in the verse that the one who have multitudes of supreme precious qualities, for example, the precious treasures like corals and pearls and so on. The Buddha has all of those supreme precious qualities. And the waters of the ocean of primordial wisdom because the Buddha has the cause of release, that is Dharani and Samadhi. Those are the treasure chest or the treasure of various jewels. Also the undefiled water and water of the bodies of the ocean, that is of vast and undefiled, which refers to the 10 bhumis of Bodhisattva. The cause of revelation of the meritorious accumulations and wisdom accumulations can bring to maturation of the sentient beings, just like the sunlight, because the Buddha has already accumulated the merits and wisdom to its completion. All of those accumulations can bring maturation to the sentient beings' liberation. Therefore, the Buddha's accumulation are just like the sunlight. As the Buddha has already fulfilled such kinds of causes of revelation, the Buddha's activity is of its full maturation or full completion. So the first
然后第三的话呢，就是
example
第三个
is
比喻的话呢，就刚才
the treasure
知道了，
and
就是一个是大海的比喻，一个是日轮的比喻。然后日轮的比喻和大
the
海的比喻呢，
the first one is the treasure, second one is ocean, and third example is the sunlight.
的时候呢，就像我们有
So
些人
upon relying
就是在以前那个学的时候呢，就是先种
on such path and all of the vehicles and all the paths,
这样以后得
there
到
are people,
法
for
斯果位的时
example,
候
whom
呢，
studied
也是这个，不管讲什么都是
lots
很
of
好的。就佛陀也是这
teachings,
样
the
的，
five
就是在因地的
treatises,
时候
and so
呢，
on and so
一个
forth.
是
And
他
for
有
these
这个
kinds
各种
of
功德的这种
Dharma
还
practitioners,
有呢
they
就是
can
用
give
这个互惠
various teachings
二种
and
这个
not
就是那
are
么
not
一次呢
afraid
就是
of
他
any
修了这
questions.
个所有
So
的法门，这是第二
just
个方面。
like how we
然
can
后第
relate to
三个的
this,
话
the
呢，这
Buddha
个意
in
思就是
fact
说，
have
因为
already
这样的因
practiced
缘呢，
and
就是
come
他
to
就获
full
得了无种
realization
无
of
边
all the
非常
vehicles.
广大
Therefore, his
如是不
activity
一般的这
do
个大
not
菩提
interrupt
啊，
at
就是
all.
这
The
个
sec
诸遍
and
诸
then
遍
the
一切
next
的
one
这个
says
大
that
菩提。
because the
所
Buddha
以佛陀的这个事业呢，
has
就会讲
already
到从各
attained
方
the
面讲
great
啊，就前面是
body,
一
the
方面
great
有两个
fruition that is the
两个比
body
喻，一
that
个是
is
日轮的
as
比喻，一
vast
个是大
as
海的比
the
喻。多方
space,
面的比喻呢是虚
and
空的比
such
喻，
kind of
这个我们
vast
不能
space
光
does
说的
not
是
have
这个
any
会
fringe
错的，
nor
大家也不用
boundary.
担心。但刚开始的时候你要明白，就是
This
所以
is
就是
the
这个是
fourth
这个虚空
example.
啊，就是这个虚空
That
的
is
比
the
喻，是吧？
space.
就空遍，就这样的。然后第四个的话呢，就是那么佛陀已经得到
That's the
了这
third
样的这个
example.
菩
That
提
is the
之后的
space.
话呢，
And then the
他就
fourth
照
one
见这个众
is
生。
that
那所有的照见
after
众生的相
attaining
续
such
当中呢，
body,
具有如来藏。你具有如来藏的话呢，
all
就是佛陀
sentient
呢，
beings
就是他愿意就是摄受他们，就是让他们也是像自己一样，就是获得这个佛果。就如果众生相续当中没有
in
具足
fact
如来藏，就
has
像一块这个石头
all
啊，木
sentient
头啊，
beings
啊，
have
那么就
the
这样的话
Buddha
呢，就是
nature
佛
that
陀也
is
看不
just
上的，
like
就
the
是我再
treasure.
给他传法论的话，他也不会有什么成数的了。
And
就但是
the Buddha
佛陀一
knows
照见，用他
all
的
of
这个智慧一照
such
见，看到哇，
intrinsic
原来是这种
treasure
树啊，已
like
经这个
nature
成了这
within
个
all
菩提了。
sentient
其实
beings.
所
Therefore,
有
the
的
Buddha
就是
gives
念满以
all
上的，就
sentient
是
beings
考
the
得好的人，考得不
teachings
好的人，都
without
是有这个如来藏。
any differentiation.
所以呢，就是佛陀已经看
Any
上了这一
sentient
面
beings,
啊，
all the way
就
from an
甚至
ant
根
to,
本没有
for
参加
example,
考试的，
Jack
就是
Ma,
外面
they
游荡的那
all
些人相
possess
续
the
当中啊，
same
就是搞破坏的那个人的
Buddha
相续
nature.
当中也有这个如来藏，就是所以
Such kind of
就
Buddha
就
nature
他就照见一
is
切众生
possessed
呢，没
by
有
the
任
ones
何
who
的差
make
别，
great
全部都
contribution
相续
and the
当中
ones
具
who
足这个
makes
十力十八
great
当中，就是
distraction.
这些隐藏的方式呢，就是功德都已经具
Sometimes
足
it
了，
is
就是
in
所
a
以
more
呢，就是这
obvious
是
way
拥抱
and a
藏的这
more
个比喻。
revealed way,
这
and
是第
sometimes it
第
is
四个
more
的话呢，
hidden.
就是拥抱
So
藏的
that's
比
the
喻。
only
然后
difference.
第
But the
五个
Buddha
的话
gives
呢，
the
就是因为
teachings, and
你要度这些
since the
众生的
Buddha
话呢，就
sees
是
the
其实这个
indifferent
众生
in
呢，
different
他虽然有
aspect
如
of the
来藏，
nature,
但是
therefore
他
the
的这
Buddha
个
gives it the
相续的这
teachings
个这个
without
外
any
面也好，相续
differentiation
上呢，
as
就是
well.
还有
And
这
the
个
fifth
有
one
固
talks
然
about
有
how
烦恼障和所
the
知障，那
sentient
就像是
beings
眼
are
云一般，
veiled
这个
by
有这个烦
their
恼障和所知障，就是这
obscuration
个是以
of
这个云来比
afflictions
喻的。
and
发现就是
obscuration of
佛
knowledge,
陀发现呢，
just
就是
like
其
the
实这些众
clouds
生的话呢，
that
他并不
could
是完全是这个佛一样
veil
的，就是他相续
the
当中还是有
space
很这个
like
严重的这
Buddha
个
nature.
烦恼障和所知障。
The
这
sentient
是
beings,
第
though
四第
possess
五个了。
such
然后呢，
undefiled
就佛
Buddha
陀在这
nature,
个时候，因为
they
他在
can
因
be
地的时候，
veiled
那么
by
三大
obscured
圣
by
之
the
间的这
veils
种积
of
累这个受这个大
afflictions
悲心，
and
就开始就
knowledge.
是对众生产
And
生
such
一个
kind
很
of
对命的这个
obscurations
心
are
啊，这
like
些众
dark
生很讨厌的，
clouds
我马上要
that can
用这
permeate
个
the whole
大悲
space.
心的印呢，就是把遣除就是这些众
However,
生的这
it
个
is
就
just a
这个障碍
temporary
的这个无因了。那么这个时候
temporary
呢，就是他
obscuration.
会
And then the
会这
fifth
个
one talks
遣除
about
他们
how
的这
the
种这
Buddha's
个
great compassion
印
is
啊，就是
just
也就是
like
说是这样的这种
the
障隔啊，就是这是这个佛陀的这个事业不间断。
ghastly wind
然后后
that
面的
would
话
be
呢，
able
就是
to blow
差
all
别的
the
差别的话呢，盖为
defilements,
那个
the
或者
cloud-like
说或者
defilements
说就是是另外一种解释方法，就是你们的
completely.
意思就是
And
说
with
呢，
such kind of
这个众
condition
生的
of
这
the
个
great wind
就佛陀
of
呢，就是
the great
就
compassion
在这个
of the
众生里
Buddha,
也好，因地的
therefore
时
the
候呢，有
Buddha's
这个修行
activity
到这个
will
实地
not
法而怎么样嘛，
interrupt.
最后呢，就是得到了这个真觉的果位。 然而他呢，就是最后也发现，就是
And then the last one talks about how the sentient beings, upon practicing on the 10th bhumi, and with the accumulation of the with the two accumulations, that is accumulation of the wisdom and merit, that they will also attain full enlightenment. For such reason, he will be able to completely destroy the obscurations of the sentient beings. Therefore, his activity, the Buddha's activities, are ever present. Now we've already finished studying the ever-present aspect and the aspect of. I interrupted. Let's look at the next one. The next one talks about for whom, how, by which training, where, and when. Since ideation as to such questions does not occur, the Muni always acts spontaneously. There are about four questions here. So who? For whom are those teachings or those activities being carried out? In fact, it is for the sake of.
然后呢，那么这个这是这样的。然后第二个呢，就是依靠这个什么样的
For the sake of all the sentient beings. Those are the ones can be tamed and can be led to liberation. And then how? It refers to the skillful means and methods. The third question is by which training or by which vehicle. For example, which one of the three vehicles would be the best to tame the beings accordingly? Then the next question. In fact, over here, by which vehicle and which skillful means, while the Buddha is fully aware of all of those skillful means and methods, the Buddha does not have any conceptual differentiations upon them. According to Avatamsaka Sutra, it states that the pure Dharmakaya of the Tathagata benefits immeasurable numbers of sentient beings. But the Dharmakaya does not have any conceptual thoughts or dualistic differentiations. For such reason, for the reason of devoid of dualistic differentiation, the Buddha can liberate and benefit the sentient beings without exception. Sometimes we feel that, sometimes we feel that the Buddha traveled to the deer park, traveled to the various areas to benefit sentient beings because of his different thoughts, but that's not true. In fact, the Buddha gave teachings upon the sentient beings without any differentiations. So over here it talks about.
然后呢，就是下面就是还有一个，但这个呢，就是一般是可能不同层面来讲。
Over here it talks about the spontaneous beneficial activities. The next one is kind of similar. However, it is from maybe a different angle. We can see it as from a different angle. The temperaments of disciples, of the many means of each, which training at what place and time, he is not mistaken as to many of these. So the Buddha is fully aware of the different means to benefit different sentient beings and disciples with different temperaments. Also, he is very clear about which method of training and which vehicle will be the best to guide the sentient beings. For example, is it for the better rebirth, or is it the path that would lead to better rebirth, or is it the path that would lead to ultimate liberation? The Buddha is very aware of that, and the Buddha would use various skillful means to lead them to those paths. And such kind of guiding and leading is completely effortless as well. There is a sutra called Leading into the Illuminous Wisdom And
比如说
all
这个大地
the
或者是日
insights
这个
and
日
experience of all
日论的方面
Tathagata
就是它
Sutra,
就
where it
照
is says
耀
that
这个
just
这个
as
世
the
界，但
sun
实际上呢，就是
would
就像我们刚
illuminate
才
the
用
whole
华严
world,
经用的一样，就是它没有分别，就是我今天
such kind of
这个把
illumination
这个
is
话呀，这个
devoid of
这个
any
盛开，那个话呀盛开，就
distinctions.
是它没有一个一
It
个的，
is
就是这样的
devoid
这个
of
分别
any
就是没有说是就是这个是上等根基，我
dichotomies.
要给它讲大乘法，
It is
然后
not
这个是中等根基，
shining
我要给
only
它
on
讲
a
地
flower
法，
but not
这
on
个
the
是
other
下乘
tree.
根基的，我要给它讲
Similarly,
这
the
个生物
Buddha,
层
in
的法，
fact, gives
或者是
teachings
这
to all
是
sentient
具
beings
有
and
这
guide
个
them to
真见的人，就真信的人，我要给
liberation.
他讲那个清净的法。然后这个是谢见的人，就是我要讲那个其他的话，就是没有
Without
这样的这个佛陀分别，
dualistically
就是佛陀就是没有这样的分别。
deciding that this
还有
person
呢，
has
佛陀呢，就是相
wrong
当于
view,
是
therefore
这
I'm
个
not
大
going
地
to
一
give
样
him
的，
teaching.
大
The
地
other
的话
person
呢，
has
就
a
是
right
不
view,
可以有
therefore I'm
任何
going
方
to
向的，它
give
就
that
非
person
常
better
平等的，
teachings.
就
The
是
Buddha
让
doesn't
真的
have such
这
kind
个
of
大地上的所有的
differentiation
草也
at
好，
all.
木也好，还有这个树木
Just
也
as,
好，就是
just
这些
like how
万
the
物呢，
sun
就是
would
靠它自然而然生长。但是
shine
大地呢，
on
就是它不会想
grass,
着
on
周边的这
trees,
棵树要让
and
它
so on
长
and
起
so
来，
forth
西边的那
without
一棵
any
这个树要
differentiations.
长起来，南边的这朵花我要
The
让它
Buddha
这
would
个
not
生长起来，
bestow
让它
more
开
light
花，就是没有
to
这
the
样的这个
tree
分
on
别。
the east
所以呢，
and less
就是虽然
light
它
to
没
the
有这样
flower
的
on the
分别，但
west
实际
so
上呢，
that the
就是
flower won't
以
grow
六
and the
度
tree
来
would
这
grow.
个
The,
度化
the,
众生
the
也
sun
好，就
doesn't
是
have
没
such
有高尚的
differentiation
心，
at
而
all.
是以他的这种法语来整
The
理
Buddha
就是等等，
similarly
有
doesn't
这样
have
的，所
the
以
mind of
说是这部
differentiating
经的
which
话呢，
one's
就是
better
有些
and which
汉地
which
啊，
disciple is
包
better
括
and
这
which
个后来
disciple
呢，就
is
是法国他
worse.
们也翻译，有
He
些柬埔寨的法师呢
equally
也
benefited
也
the
翻译
sentient
过，就是
beings.
这个就
The
是
sutra that
这
I
个佛
just
的这个境
mentioned
界的话，可能我们有
were
些时候的话呢，
translated
其实也
into
是
the Chinese
不太这么
language
懂啊，
by
就
various
是因为
masters.
我们这个祈祷的时候就是
Sometimes we may feel
就
that
如果这个真正是佛啊，或者说是谁的话呢，那就不能那个就是他有真正有这样的这个无为的智慧的话呢，以自然而然的一种相当于是一种
sometimes
巧思里面
whenever we
得到这个
make supplications, we should have such a faith that we
我要那
can
个
receive
什么
the
停车
teachings
的时候呢，
from
一直找不到停车位，就是我
the
祈祷
Buddhas
这
and
个
bodhisattvas
圣
because
世界，
their
后来有
blessings are
现在正在
unobstructed
这个大家
and
都停车的时候，根本
without
上是很累的，
differentiation.
现
It
在
is all permeating.
现在又不敢那
There
个
was a
祈
person
祷
who
上
told
师，
me
不
that,
然的话
oh,
我
I
说
don't
拉
want
玛
to
钦就是
supplicate to
就后来
the
我就
teacher
就
when I want to
就
find a
因为
parking
祈
spot.
祷
I
这个
don't
拉
want
玛
to
钦拉玛
pray
钦
that I
就
can
已经
find a
找到
parking
了这个停车位，
spot
然后呢就有这个忏悔，哎呦，上师很辛
from
苦
the
啊，
Lama
就是
because I
刚
feel
才
that
你
if
这
I
么忙
chant
还
Lama
给
Chin,
我
Lama Chin,
找出一个
Lama Chino,
停
Lama
车
Chino,
位，
then
就
my
让我
Lama
有
would get
忏
too
悔啊，
tired
就是
from
就是有
my
些人可
praying.
能是真的，我也理
There are
解，就是
people
大
who
家
would
都是
feel
学
in
过
this
这个
way.
唯物论吧，就对吧？就是
Maybe
如果
because
此事
everyone
不是
studied
其事，就是那么
materialistic
就是如果实
studies
有的这种加持
and
也
are
好，
very
实有
much
的这种佛
infused
也
in
好，
such
实有
kind
的
of
这个上
thoughts.
师们也好，菩萨们
Therefore,
的
you
话呢，可
feel
能
that
是
the
确
Buddhas
实
and
是他
bodhisattvas
就
and the
就特别
Lamas,
累吧，
the
就是
great
这个加持的
masters
话呢，
are
那你有
of
一个，就像现
an
在
existent
有时候是
entity,
这个
and
出
then they
什么
would
事
get
情的时候
tired.
呢，有一些警
But
察
the
就是这
blessings,
些
in fact,
这里
are
也这个开始教
unobscured
他，
and
那里也开始教他，
unobstructed.
就是
It is all
比如说同时
permeating
这个
without any
有
differentiation.
有几个地方就是发生这个交通事故的话呢，那这个
There are people
交通这个管制就是什么那些警察呢，就是很这个麻烦嘛。但如果佛也是这样的，就是我们每一个人这个祈祷，尤其
would
是开发会
think
的时
that
候，
the
每
Buddhas
一
and
个人祈祷
bodhisattvas
的，
are
有
just
些
like
人呢就是
traffic
祈祷的特
police.
别好，有些人呢祈祷的不是
They
就是特
would
别好。但
then
不管怎么样，大家
manage
都
all
是
the
点
traffic
点点点
accidents
下班
and
这样的时候，佛都
all
都去就
and
看着每
implement
个人
those
就是对我好一
regulations.
点，每个人对
That's
我
how
不
they
好，
view the
就
Buddhas
那
and
对每一个人
bodhisattvas.
就如果有
Whenever
不同
we
的这个
dedicate
方式来
merit
给
and
他这个
chant
回应的话呢，
verses,
确实
we
佛陀
would
就是怎么
also
样也是
generate
很
certain
美的。
thoughts
但
of
实际上呢，就这个就是我们
differentiations
就
of the
经常也
beings.
是这样
For
的吧，就
example,
是
so
在
and
这
so
个
is really nice
这
to
个
me, and
舆
then
论呢，就是在虚空当中，然
and
后
then
他虽
you
然没
would
有分别，
probably
就是也没
then
有这么，
think
但
more
是
of
依靠
them
一
when
种
it's
缘起呢，
dedication
他
of both merit, but the other way around when it comes to your foes. Anyhow, the Buddha's way of bestowing blessings is different than how some people would understand it as a certain solid existence of entity. That is not the case at all. The Buddha, in fact, benefits sentient beings effortlessly and spontaneously, without any obstruction whatsoever. Do not think in the way that I shouldn't really pray to the Buddha to help me and to alleviate suffering or to dispel any obstacles. Otherwise, I have so many obstacles and so many difficulties, and if I were to ask the Buddha to bless me and help me at all the times, then the Buddha would be too tired from helping me. That is not true at all. In fact, if you've studied some of the ultimate teachings and where you've studied the absolute truth, and you will understand how the Buddha's wisdom and power of blessing is unobstructed. You will be able to understand that such kind of blessings is just like the natural, is like a natural law. The more you pray and supplicate, the more blessings you'll be able to receive, the more power you'll be able to receive. It is so because of dependent origination. If you understand dependent origination, then with the implementation of sincere prayer and supplication, you will definitely be able to receive great insights, great spiritual insights, and you will be able to feel the blessings. If you don't have any faith, and if you don't have any genuine faith, then it will be difficult for you to receive the blessings. Later on in the Sutra of Great Liberation, in the next class, we will study how each and every thought you should uphold faith, and you should uphold devotion, and confess and supplicate in such a way. If you practice, you will definitely be able to receive the great blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Some of our practitioners may feel that, I probably shouldn't supplicate to the Buddha right now because maybe I'm not worthy to receive such blessings right now. Maybe such kind of practitioners are viewing the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as some people with great powers. That they would feel that, for example, as ordinary beings, though they're at a higher social status or for more authority, they would still differentiate if you're nicer to them or not, so that they will make the decision to help you or not. There are people who would use this kind of logic and make offering. People would make offering to bigger statue rather than a smaller statue in the monastery, and they would prefer to make offering to the ones that are more well known than the ones that are less well known. That's the kind of very mundane logic people would use when it comes to supplication and prayers. The next aspect, let's look at how the various aspects, the 5 aspects of uninterruptedness. Previously, we've already studied the 6th aspect of spontaneity. And now let's look at the uninterruptedness. In terms of the uninterruptedness, first of all, it is of the cause of
什么这个中车、等车、神通啊，就是这些是叫出离。
The cause of
然后呢，就
release,
是它的
the
实现志愿
release from the fetters, that
这
is.
是因啊，但这个应该从意义上没有什
The
么差别。
benefit
然后
that
实现志
the
愿的话
Buddha
呢
would
就
bestow
刚才
to
那
the
个
sentient
讲的这
beings
个
is
激烈二次论，就是
uninterrupted.
相对论一般的这个比喻。
Since with
然后呢，
regard to
就
the
是逼
definitive
过的
revelation
逼
of
过的话呢，
release,
就是
it
依靠这
supports
样
its
的因
fruit.
缘呢，就是
Those
土地
being
的过
fully
就是
sustained
像是不一
their
样的，就是
obscurations
形
and the
状。
conditions
然
cutting
后这
these
个有了
fields,
过以后呢，
there
就
is
是
no
过以了，
ideation.
然后就是摄术事业，摄术事业对境
So
也
first of
就
all,
是
let's look at
众
the
生具
5
有如来
different
藏识，他
aspects.
就
The
看准了
first
这些
one
众
talks
生。
about
然后呢，
how
就是就对境的这个缩断障碍，就是这个缩断障碍呢，
cause
就
of
是刚才这个
release
云母一样
shows
的这个缩
its
断障碍。之后的话
or
呢，就是避障，就是避障的话呢，能断的这个障碍的智慧，也就是说佛陀的这个像风一样的，就是这种有大悲的
and
这
the
个风。
causes
那
for
虽然
its
是
revelation
先线
as
上呢，
well
就是依靠
as
这个
the
六种方法
fruition
来进行
that
这个
will
运
come
作
to
那这个呢，实
as
际上是
well
我有这个
as
分别。
the
那个好像
sentient
其他的有
beings
些
that
外文当中
the
的话呢，就是这
activities
几个次
will
第啊，就是要
be
么
able
就是
to
好像不是这个一次性的
liberate
次第，就是
also
这
the
种方式可能
obscurations
是不对的，应该是它
and
是
the
就是一步一步
conditions
上来的，先这个
conducive
因地，然后
to
过渡，过
eradicate
渡以后
the
的话呢，就是摄
obscurations.
受众生，
All
摄
of
受
those
众
are
生的时候呢，就
interrupted
是发
and
现有众
effortless.
生有这个障碍，就然后呢有佛陀用他的
Sometimes
这个
when
大悲
the
咒来
sentient
这个吹
beings
拂啊，就是不是这几个都是分开的，就是应该就是这样的。
sometimes people may feel that each of
然后
them
呢，
are
第二个呢，就是
separated
接受它
from
的
one
意义。
another,
刚才是
but
那个嘛，
over
就
here,
是
in fact,
是
it
它的
is
名称，就是现在是意义，等一会儿是
leading
地
from
义
one
就
to
是
the next.
这几个都基本上这个不同层面来讲的吧。那么处理呢，就是刚才第一个就是就讲的是这个啊，就是处理的话呢，就是从基系地到这个发运地，就是湿地啊，就是湿地的话呢，就是我们这个处理的这个湿地，处理的话呢，就是从轮回当中要这个处理，就是也就是说得到解脱的，我们所谓的处理心就是一样的，就是这个因。那么这个是湿地，就是从一地到湿地之间的。然后第二个呢，就是二字是必因，就是它真的是这个福慧二种资粮的话
There's
呢，实际上
another
是湿地的
interruption.
这些功德呢，就是越来越增长的一
Okay,
种最
we're
好
back.
的这个现
Let's
世
look at
的
the
因，
next
或
one.
者说现世
The
的愿也可以
next
说
one
是，
we're
因为依靠
talking
两种
about
资粮的话呢，就是实际上是
the
把
two
这个菩提的
accumulations.
果呢，就是可以就是显示
So
出
over
来，
here,
这个
the we're looking
然
at
后
the
第三
next
个的
verse
话呢，
where
必
it
果
says the
这个
10
生菩提
levels
啊，必果生菩提的话
definitely
呢，就是意
review
思下
release.
面的
So
这
the
个
release
将因缘的
is
这个符号也
the
打错了，就是这个要改。然后在这个是就刚才前面
cause
是两个这
and
个
the
因的这个
review,
圆满，
the
就是也
release.
是这个主要是普陀不间断的一个意思。
The 10 levels is
然后遇到这个
definitively
具体的这个
review
圆满
release,
正
and
正
the
确的这个
two
果位的话呢，
accumulations
就是实际
are the
上普
cause
陀
for
的这个
such
誓言呢，也不
release.
会间断的。
Then
这是
the
第四个
supreme
啊，这第
enlightenment
三
is a
个。
fruit of
然后
these.
第四个的话呢，就是
Enlightenment
菩提
is
得到菩提以后
being
干什么呢？就是
fully
色数
sustained. This
啊，
is
我
the
们也是
fourth one.
一样的，以后学到一个
After
知识以后呢，
attaining
不要就是
such
一直说，
enlightenment,
就是你看
the
这个我们原来华严
function
的
of
这个
such
那个
is
这
to
个相关专论的修行次第当中也是讲，
tame
就是
the
成佛以后
sentient
并不
beings.
是就是做什么其他
According
的
to
主要
Lam
的一
Rimid,
个
it
东西。
says
你看
that
这里也是
the
佛这个
function
先就
or
是这
the
个实地
reason
圆满以
of
后就是菩
attaining
提，菩提以后的话呢
Buddhahood
要
is
摄众
no
生啊，
other
就是这
than
这个很
benefiting
重要的。
sentient
我
beings.
们
In
这
fact,
里也
benefiting
是，
sentient
不
beings
管是
is
你
the
得什
sole
么法
reason
师也
of
好，得
one
毕
should
业也
aspire
好，
for the
得
body.
堪布堪木也好，就是然后
Whatever
得
kinds
到
of
以后呢，就是
certificate
自己
all
就
of
啊，
our
就是
Sangha
说
would
傲慢
receive,
第
let
一
it be
天
the
傲慢第一
certificate
下
of
那个
Dharma teacher of
不留
Khenpos and
嫉妒
Khenmos.
心理，然后也不去转
After
发为
receiving
不信
such
民众，不去发
certificates,
心
you
这
should
样
keep in mind
确
that
实
you are
不
not
行的。你看得到佛陀以后的话呢，
attaining
就是
these
看观察，就
two
是我要佛陀成佛以后干什么呢？就要这个摄受众生，就是这个是大家也
to
应该知道这个词。然后
buff
要摄
on
受
your
众生，
own
就是这个是第
arrogance.
四
In
个。
in
然
fact,
后第五
you're
个的话呢，
attaining
就
these
是有无
certificates
量这个
so
障碍
that
的
it
烦
could
恼
be
和
a
还有这个
skillful
碎
means
烦恼
for
习
you
气，
to
这个
benefit
是他要
sentient
所
beings.
所断除的。就是到了第五个的话呢，就是色素众生，就
And then the
是
fifth
众
one
生的这
is
个如来
that
藏后面呢，就是上面呢，就是有这个无量的障碍和还有这个习气
as the
要
sentient beings
要断掉，
have
就是要这个是。
great numbers
然后最后
of
一个呢，就是诸事
afflictions
推
as
比较
well
是
as
力
the
量。那一切
latent habitual patterns, the great latencies, then those are just like the clouds. And then the sixth one says that with the great compassion that is like the wind that could eradicate all of the previously stated true obscurations and afflictions. Once we obtain great wisdom, the ultimate wisdom, we will naturally generate a great sense of great compassion as well, spontaneously. And then at that time, we should try to eradicate the dark clouds of the afflictions of the sentient beings. Sometimes we don't have of course, we don't have the great wind like the great power of the Buddha to eradicate the obscuration of the sentient beings, but at least we have some power. After a few years of studying, you can still benefit the sentient beings with the teachings provided in the Dharma teachings that you've studied. You can still benefit sentient beings with whatever effort of your wind is to dispel their obstacles and dispel their afflictions, all the way up from mind-only school. In fact, we understand that all sentient beings have Buddha nature. Anything below the mind-only school, they would think that there are still beings who are considered as the ones who already eradicated fully of their virtuous roots. But anything above the mind school, if your view is anything higher than the mind-only school, then you would be able to understand all sentient beings have Buddha nature. It is only that their Buddha nature has been obscured by their afflictions and their obscurations. Sometimes their obscurations could be obscuration of affliction. Sometimes it could be to knowledge. Sometimes it could be manifested in the way of jealousy, of anger, and so on and so forth. And whenever we encounter those beings with such kinds of afflictions, we can give them teachings accordingly. Sometimes we can reveal various teachings that would alleviate them from their obscurations. Sometimes we can give them blessings with a vajra, with a dagger, and so on and so forth. And sometimes I think people would prefer empowerments, and they would grasp onto the form of being blessed and being empowered by a dagger and a vajra, but they don't really value and treasure the importance of the Dharma. Just as whenever I see people from my hometown, from the Tibetan plateau, they have great amount of faith. They grasp onto giving blessings by giving a blow of air. Sometimes, especially during this pandemic, I don't feel very comfortable with that because we're wearing masks. And whenever I give the blow of air as a way of signifying that it is being blessed, I feel that all of those I feel a little bit uncomfortable because of this pandemic, but the seniors, all those old people in Tibet, they grasp onto this ritual of having this particular sign of giving blessings that is breathing onto their malas and their objects. Whenever I go to the Chinese disciples, the Chinese assembly, they rather have a very different way of showing their faith. Sometimes, especially the female disciples, they would yell out, "Oh, my Lama!" And it almost sounds like a group of fans chasing the celebrity. Anyhow, I would like to address that later on, whenever we have any activities, empowerments, blessings, and classes. We should maintain a rather mild manner. within a good temperament. Don't get too enthusiastic. Don't get too zealous over the teacher's presence and so on and so forth. Otherwise, it could generate a wrong view towards the people without faith or without a wrong view. Last year, I heard some Lama indeed blow air as a way of bestowing blessings to the blessed objects, and whomsoever received those blessed objects all got infected with COVID. So we have to be aware of our actions at the right time. I'm not sure where I got sidetracked. Let's then get back to the actual text. The next talks about the examples and how the examples would correspond to the teachings given above. The first one is ocean, that is just like the ten bhumis, the bodhisattvas of the ten bhumis of the bodhisattvas, and then the sun that correspond to the accumulation of the two merits, of the accumulation of the two provisions of the wisdom and merit. And then the next one is the space, that is the fruition, that is a great Bodhi. And then the next one is the treasure, which is the element of the sentient beings. In fact, over here, what is taught is very much in steps. The way you understand it should be in steps. Let's look at how it is step by step. The first one says that the ocean refers to the ten bhumis of the bodhisattvas, which is like the great bodhisattva, the great teacher, then first of all bestow such kind of path. And then the second one is like the sun-like. The sun-like provision, that is the two accumulations. And then with such kind of shining of the sunlight, the disciples would be able to accumulate the two provisions. Well, I would like to address a few things. Recently, I've heard that there are all kinds of calamities happening in various places of this world. So we should supplicate to the Tara, to Amasambhava, to Avalokiteshvara, and those deities that you have great faith in. Various places, including Henan province, as well as other places. Places abroad as well. For example, you can see from these photos. The first one is in London. They recently had heavy rainfall, and that caused the flooding. Also in Germany, you can see the cars are also all merged inside the water. Also Belgium, as well as the Netherlands. So these are the places in Europe. And this is a photo of California. Recently, they're suffering from wildfire because of the unprecedented high temperature. in the western part of United States, there are the eruption of volcanoes, and in Europe you can see flooding. It seems that the world is suffering from all kinds of calamities, natural calamities, because of the climate change. It is indeed quite unusual. Many catastrophes and natural calamities are occurring in this world. We never know when impermanence will dawn. We would never know whenever we would die and whatever kinds of calamity would happen around us. So we should generate a sense of impermanence to all of us. This is the manifestation of impermanence from the nature to the sentient beings to all of us. On the outside, the four elements could be impermanent, and on the inside of our physical body, there are the four elements that would encounter any kinds of impermanence as well. When we're still alive, when we're still free, have all the conducive conditions to practice and to supplicate to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, we should engage in such activities to generate conducive causes and conditions, because the dependent origination is indeed inconceivable. Therefore, we have to, on one hand, supplicate to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas so that we have conducive conditions to continue our virtuous practice. And on the other hand, we have to see that impermanence is just around the corner, and we have to be very aware of how little of time that we still have. We still have the opportunity to listen to the Dharma, and we can still consider ourselves as very fortunate. While we have conducive conditions and having a good life, we also have to be aware of all the sentient beings suffering in the ocean of samsara. This is what we need to do as practitioners of Mahayana. What we can do to the sentient beings is that we can chant, we can supplicate and pray to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for their blessings. On the other, we need to then rededicate the merit to all kinds of spirits, all kinds of spiritual existence and maras and disturbing spirits, so that the obstacles will be alleviated. The pandemic is still ongoing in this world. It has already engulfed many lives within the whole wave of the epidemic. So we definitely, as Mahayana practitioners, need to supplicate and pray for all the sentient beings. The upcoming part is rather simple, so I'm going to move rather quickly to finish this part of the teaching. Previously, we've already studied the examples, and we've studied the various explanations, and the next one we're going to align together with or attach and illustrate the meaning with the examples. First of all the great wisdom water that is undefiled and all the treasures of miraculous penetrations, such too comes to the cause of relief, that is the ocean-like 10 bhumis of the Bodhisattva, which could benefit sentient beings in the way that would reveal the cause for them to review their
就是它叫做是这个实现之因了，就实现之因。那么
revealed
这个
the
不会二种资粮的话呢，
two
实际上
provisions
就是这个日论
or two accumulations,
就是日论
that
这
is
这
the
两个都是
wisdom
可以说是在因
and
地之分，一个是出于
merit
之因，一
that
个
is
是实
just
现
like
之因吧，
the
就现实之因。
sun.
这是，然后第三个的话呢，就是
So the first one
就是光无中边
the
故
cause of
菩提就是
release,
入
and
世
second
所
one
爱，因为得
is
到这个菩提的时候呢，那
the
这种境界
cause
呢，
of
就是
reveal
神光就是不可
or
测量，
revelation.
但无有
The next verse says that there is no fringe nor center, just like the space, and such a space like body is the nature of all the dharmas. We see that space is definitely a very favorable metaphor that is used by Maitreya Bodhisattva. The fourth one says that after attaining such Bodhi, the true cause that would cause the sentient beings to attain fruition is because the sentient beings already have the treasure of Buddha nature. So this example goes that the sentient beings already have the Buddha nature, just like how there is a hidden treasure within all sentient beings in the element of the sentient beings. The fifth one is that the adventitious defilements are pervasive but are not of any solid existence. The adventitious stains could pervade all sentient beings, meaning all sentient beings could have afflictions. However, they are not existent compared to the space-like nature that is Buddha nature. Therefore, they're just like clouds. The adventitious stains are just like clouds. To dispel such clouds of adventitious stains,
就如果要这个牵住这些无云的话，那就是其实要什么就是
in fact, the Buddha
要这个进驻，就是释道，就是开示道，就是转法论，就是转法论。那么转法论呢，
turn the Dharma wheel
就是进驻居住就是那么这个释道
and abide at all times.
存在就是进驻，因为这个
First of all, there's the turning of the wheel, and there's the vehicle, and then turning of the Dharma wheel, so that the Buddha could dispel the cloud-like adventitious stains with his wind-like great compassion.
这是那个就这个比喻啊，就是这个。
This is the next example.
吹散烦恼云的，是的，金主，对，就这样可能好一点了。这是那最后的话呢，就是我们这个
And then the last one
不间断的
is a summary of the way it is uninterrupted. So we had two summaries. The first summary is summary of the spontaneous aspect, and the second one summary of the uninterrupted aspect. Their release is accomplished for the sake of others. They see the quality of themselves and sentient beings, and their activity is not complete to its full extent. Thus, their deeds will never cease while samsara exists. Let it be benefiting sentient beings.
要这个成佛的话呢，就是它最早的来源是什么呢？就是要利益众生，就是这个是最根本的。
Or
然后得到这个成佛以后的话呢
in fact, benefiting sentient beings is the goal of attaining Buddhahood.
就是 看到这个众生的话呢，跟自己一模一样的，就是他有这个解脱的这种希望。
After seeing the quality of the sentient beings are of the same as the Buddhas, which is Buddha nature, and they all have the potential to attain Buddhahood. So, as Mahayana practitioners, we need to first of all develop a sense of renunciation and compassion, and on the other, we need to develop a sense of trust and faith of the sentient beings, that all sentient beings can attain full liberation. The sentient beings, if they do not have any Buddha nature, then the Buddhas would no longer have, then the Buddhas would be jobless. It is because all sentient beings, numberless and innumerable, therefore, and immeasurable, therefore, the Buddhas would always have the opportunity to dispel the obstacles of the sentient beings. So they will always have their job. According to Bodhisattva Charavatara, it says that until the end of the space and boundary of the space, until the abiding of all the sentient beings, may I also abide in this world to dispel the suffering of all sentient beings. Unlike how some practitioners may think that, oh, it's a lot of suffering happening in this world, I might as well just enter into retreat and I'll see you later. It is not the proper action of a genuine Mahayana practitioner. After seeing the suffering of the sentient beings, the Buddha, in fact, uninterruptedly would benefit the sentient beings. As the uninterrupted numbers of the sentient beings and uninterrupted or the pervasive aspect of the obscuration that would permeate over the sentient beings, the Buddha always would abide in this world to benefit sentient beings. There are some Dharma teachers whom benefited the sentient beings by giving the teachings to them for many, many years, and there are the ones whom, after receiving the certificate of Dharma teachers qualification, they only would give teachings for a very short period of time and then stop their activities. So for lots of our Sangha member whom provide service to the Sangha, I think it would be the best for them to maintain in their post, because they're very familiar with their post and they're very good at their work and good at interacting with the others. If we were to ask them to change their posts, then it could be difficult for them to get used to the other posts. So I think it's really essential to make sure that people have the opportunity and conducive conditions to benefit the sentient beings and benefit the Sangha whenever possible. We need to produce such kind of conducive conditions. Over here it says that until the end of time, until the end of the sentient beings, may I stay in this world and alleviate the suffering of the sentient beings. Whatever suffering, whatever difficult conditions it may be, may I stay in this world to benefit and to liberate the sentient beings. It is not that easy. In fact, the sentient beings are of the coarse temperament and they are very barbarous at times. And sometimes, even if we were try to benefit them with our best intention of if we were very kind to them, sometimes they tend to be very difficult to tame, and sometimes they tend to even repay our kindness with revenge. We never really would know what kind of coarse sentient beings there are. But as bodhisattvas, they really feel that the Saha world is the best playground to practice patience, because the sentient beings are of such low capacity or such inferior temperament. I am simply saying that talking about the bodhisattva's level of realization from a theoretical aspect. So this concludes the class for today.